Kevin, how are you?
I'm good, Tim. How are you?
Yeah, not well. Do you know what? I woke up this morning and I've got a bit of a head cold, so I've been on lots of tea. I took the day off teaching, so
Okay. Yeah, I think there's
just trying to get through it.
some gnarly flu. It seems to be going around the States over here, but I'm holding strong at the moment.
Yeah. So how's the start of the year been?
Been nice. Had a little bit of time off the road from the Lainey Wilson gig, and
Mhm.
actually been finding myself in more of the producer's chair on some projects with some good friends of mine the last couple months, and I really enjoy that work, and it's a lot more juggling
Mm.
than just showing up and playing guitar, but I do find it rewarding in its own way.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. What was your kind of your way into playing and to getting involved in? Well, how did you get into just music first of all?
Sure. I'd say, bass level. I've got an older brother. He's 5 years older. He's a drummer. And when we were kids, this would have been late 90s, early 2000s, felt like, CDs were becoming a thing. So our dad was just a huge music fan, big rock and roll fan, but also able to digest jazz as a listener, but a non-player in a way that is pretty amazing. So really, the earliest memories were just riding around in his car and the early CDs he was buying, kind of recapturing the old vinyl collection.
Yeah.
So it was really, Beatles, Abbey Road would have been in the first batch, and Little
Mhm.
Feat were his absolute favorites. So it was really more of a listening, just what is that?
Mm.
Gradually, some cheap instruments entered the basement, and we were off to the races, I suppose. But and
Okay.
then I can't leave out my mom riding around in her car. Oldies radio used to be a thing over here, which is
Yeah.
really code word for Motown and all that 60s British invasion stuff.
hmm
And wasn't always my favorite to listen to at the time, but then later on in life, be on gigs, playing covers, and realize I knew all these songs just through osmosis.
Yeah.
So got to shout out to mom as well.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think my musical doorway was through my mum. It was
Right on.
radio was always on. She would always have music on in the car. Although my dad liked music, and he does, like, he's a huge Eagles fan.
Okay.
So but I just remember it was always my mum who would put the music on, and she was always like the Carole King Tapestry album, Joshua Tree by U2, loads of Elton John, and that was kind of all the music that I was kind of raised on. Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, it's amazing. I speak to so many people, like my students included, and I ask them, what music do you listen to? And the ones that kind of get music, it's always, my mum and dad always had records on. They always put songs on. They made sure that music was always on in the house. And it's the kids that don't have that kind of, no, kind of struggle with just things like song structure, like the form of a song. Like, this is a chorus, this is a verse, this is a bridge. People that don't listen to music kind of struggle with that.
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of this podcast deals with practice and getting better, and I feel like there's such a built-in massive component of just absorbing music as a listener, that I do feel is like the most important aspect of it, and just making that well as deep as it can go. And, as we started progressing in music, became interested in jazz, and got the itch to maybe, study it in school in college.
Yeah.
And at that point, it can be easy. And I see this in a lot of musicians along the way, of like, you can kind of block out the stuff that you feel like you're not supposed to be checking out if you're interested in jazz or something like that.
Mm.
Then what I inevitably see, everyone who keeps at it, like, you break through that and then realize that it's all music and it's all part of the same thing, and I think Duke Ellington said there's only two kinds of music, good and bad.
Yeah.
Which I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly as I've gotten older, there was this kind of tribalism and certainly in school, that there were kids that listened to rock and heavy metal, then there were the kids that listened to the electronic dance music, and then there were other, and and never the two would meet. And
Sure.
As you've gotten older, it's like, you know what, like there's some music that's shit and there's some music that's great, and you like what you like and throw away the stuff you don't, whether that is pop, dance, rock, metal, jazz, fusion, country. It's if it touches you, then
I'm with you.
It's good, man.
Especially like even, talking about just straight up pop music in its, I guess, modern form. I mean, to me, it's like, is it funky or not? And a lot of that music is. So, if something's funky, I can usually figure out something to like about it, And I've always just, people who are just so negative about different kinds of music always kind of struck me as like not what I want to be, whether I love it or not.
Yeah, I mean, my daughter's playing the ATP song, Bruno Mars, and what's the girl's name?
Lady Gaga.
Rose, Bruno Mars.
Right on.
To get it up. And I listened to it and I'm like, God, it's just repetitive garbage. I'm walking around the house singing it.
Sure.
And it's like, well, they've done something right, because I'm here singing it, and it's not something that I would usually, dip my toes into.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, man, it's good. So, practicing, getting better. What's your view on practicing?
For a long time, I found it a little overwhelming. I never struggled to pick up a guitar and start playing, but the just marathon hours and hours working on stuff. I've always struggled to have the discipline to really do that. But then, studying music in school, there's no shortage of things you need to work on, and I definitely got better. But also, again, there was that fear, I think, and that overwhelming nature of the amount of time it might take to become one of those jazz guys that's going to end up in New York and really give it a go. But, I was always in bands, and had a rock band that kind of morphed into a country band at some point. And we were all based out of DC, and then we made the move to Nashville. So, that was always the focus. It was about playing music more so than playing a genre. But what I found in maybe the last, 5 to 6-ish years is that, that the overwhelming nature of everything there is to learn and work on isn't quite as overwhelming. And I'll usually, every year I'll catch like a spurt for maybe 2 to 3 months where I feel like I'm really hitting it hard and really exploring some stuff and getting better. And what that's morphed into for me is writing and recording some instrumental music that I don't claim the title jazz, but it is more modern jazz than it is anything else. I guess so much of practice I think is about really finding your own voice. What I've kind of broken through on in the last few years is like, if finding your own voice is a struggle, well, what's coming out when you sit down with your instrument, whether it's warming up or just the kind of ideas that start to come together when you're just playing, you're not worried about learning anything specific. And then, I find gradually that sort of approach turns into unlocking little compositional things that might turn into something. And I've started to make a point to write those things down and record them every couple of years. And, I feel like when there's a compositional element of practice, I find that's getting me the closest to where I want to be, or, getting me further on the path.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much kind of endless noodling. Like, people pick up their guitar and say, "Yeah, I'm practicing," and they're just working through the same stuff that they've already been playing, and there's either no focus to it, or they just don't know what to do. They're kind of like a little bit lost. And I think certainly the idea of recording yourself and listening back is really important.
Yeah,
The
you learn a lot
like,
about yourself that way, you know.
yeah, you get to sit and dissect it and go, right, am I ahead of the beat? Am I behind it? Am I pushing? What am I doing? What's the tone like? What's my vibrato like? And that's something that I think nobody pays attention to, is things like vibrato and bending. And it's
Yeah,
kind of my bugbear. And I listen to like a beautiful line, and then someone just spoils it with really shit vibrato.
well, and that's the kind of stuff that, my experience coming up was, you're playing in bars and clubs and that sort of thing, and then you get in a studio environment where there's a SM57 jammed right up against the grill cloth of the amp, and you're not getting the help from that room sound. Yeah, some things will poke their heads out that you didn't know were there, and it's all the articulation, the vibrato, in rock and roll, the length of a bend and when you're getting there and not overshooting, and just it definitely puts the microscope up to those things, but you get used to it. And same thing with, playing live on in-ear monitors. That was a big handicap at first, and then get the hang of it. And even if it's not what I know the sound is like out in a venue, I'm able to trust that if I can make this sound good, it's going to sound good out there. Kind of like, hearing mix engineers talk about like Yamaha NS 10s. If you can get a mix to sound good on those, it's going to sound good anywhere.
Yeah. So what about getting better? I mean, what does getting better mean to you today versus, what did it mean to you when you first picked up, or even 10 years ago when you first moved to Nashville? Has it changed?
For sure. I feel like I have almost like a double life, in that on one side of it, getting better is, being better at the things I'm called to do here in Nashville and, in studio environments, but also, being the right person for a live gig, such as, Lainey, who I've been fortunate to be with for like 6-ish years at this point. And that's like the practical side. That's the stuff that keeps the mortgage paid.
Yeah.
But then there's the more personal thing, which feeds into like recording my own instrumental music, coming from the jazz place. And for the longest time, in a very nuts and bolts way, the hole in my game was, harmony and like chord melody, that sort of style as it pertains to jazz. And, I think it was some time away from school and all that, just to like, I want to sit down and deal with this for the sake of dealing with it, because if I don't start at some point, it's never going to happen. And then, gradually those things start to work themselves into my playing. Sometimes it might be sitting down and transcribing some stuff, but I'm not as disciplined about that as I should be. But sometimes it's also, I play keyboard as well and a bunch of other stringed instruments.
Right.
So try to keep at least some baseline of proficiency happening on these different things.
Okay.
There's always something to work on. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And do you think there's anything that people should be working on that they're not?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I would say, I guess piggybacking off what I just rambled, don't ignore the parts of your playing that are maybe in demand and getting used often. But also, I would urge someone listening to also don't ignore the side of it that is more personal. I feel like if playing is only based on, whatever that word success means, or, getting a gig or being busier or all that stuff, that's great. And I love the feeling when the phone rings and someone's asking me to do something related to music. There's really few things like that kind of thrill. But, if you're only measuring your worth as a player against that sort of stuff, and you don't have some baseline of like working on a craft, I've found very little satisfaction. It's never enough, whereas if I'm more grounded and getting better at my craft, those other results, for one, don't seem to carry as much weight, and two, tend to happen naturally if I'm doing the right stuff and making some music every day,
Yeah. So when you in your early days of music or learning music, were you kind of sitting down with a metronome kind of guy, going through scales and arpeggios and all that kind of stuff? Were you just jamming along to records? What was your kind of your learning method, or a bit of both?
Yeah, I mean, early on, it would have just been like, going on the internet, getting guitar tabs and trying to learn, rock songs that way. And then, I was very fortunate in that growing up in the DC area, there was no shortage of great players. Some world-class musicians. I think every city's got those musicians that are world-class. Maybe just didn't make a move to like a place like Nashville or London or LA or New York, but could have, and just kind of both my brother and I, with a lot of help from Dad driving us to and from clubs to go see these people and whatnot, started taking some lessons from different folks, and the real book started becoming a thing, learning those tunes, but then promptly realized, like, if you're only learning a song, specifically a standard, out of the real book, you're really missing the whole deal. It's like, this is music that's meant to be listened to, and like a lot of these old standards have lyrics, and that's a valuable tool when playing a song, is knowing what the lyrics are. Just that kind of stuff where you realize that it's so much deeper than just learning some changes and all that. A metronome, definitely a great tool, and certainly it's very baked into working in any kind of recording studio these days. I remember that being pretty overwhelming at first when I was a kid, and my old band were learning how to make a record. And I don't know, over time realized, like, this thing is actually your friend, if you work with it.
Yes, yeah. That moment when you kind of, like, when the first time you play to a click and you're like, the thing keeps moving, it's speeding up. It's like, no, man, it's you.
Yeah.
And so then it becomes really daunting. It's like the click, like, can you play to the click? And then I actually had some drum lessons, and when
That's great, yeah.
I don't know, I think it was about 7 or 8 years ago, and I was running like a little rock school inside one of the schools that I teach at, and I had no way of communicating to the drummer. I'm like, well, I know what everything's called, but I don't know how to tell you how to play this groove. So I was like, okay, well, I'll go and have some drum lessons, and just some basic grooves, how to play a rock groove. And the guy put me on a click, and he said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the clicking at 60, but you'll be playing the click will be at 120, but you're going to be playing at 60. So you got to count those eight notes. That's going to be your high. I was like, oh, right. So I've never done that before. Like 20 years of doing this. He said, yeah. The other thing we'll do is I'm going to set the click up, and the click is just going to be the backbeat. I'm like, and it was just like, fuck, I can groove to that now. If that click is just clicking along at like 55, 60, that's the backbeat. Right. I was like, God damn it. I was like, right, okay. And then that just kind of infiltrated into my guitar playing. And I'd sit there and just try and play like little 1-note, 2-note funk grooves with a click at 50. It's like, that's the backbeat. I'm like, and then that's when it starts to be your companion. And you can just lean up against it. It's like, okay, we'll try pushing it. Now try dragging. It's like, okay, this is is cool. This is fun now.
Push and pull against it. And
yeah.
I used to play a lot more bass guitar.
Mm.
I don't do it as much anymore. Oftentimes when I look at the amount of things I'm trying to cram into my car, going to do a session or something, I regret the days, given up the days when all I had to bring was like a bass and a tuner.
Yeah.
What I used to do for a while is I just warm up. I'd play along to Let's Groove by Earth, Wind and Fire, that bass line. It's mostly that for the entire song, and try to get into that meditative sort of space. And I think there's such a meditative aspect of practice. And like I said, when that can be linked with some composition, even if it's just, writing just some little ideas that, exploring things on the neck, I do find they're all kind of wrapped into the same package,
Yeah. And so did you, when you started, like, are you a studied player? Did you go to college or university or anything to study music, or?
Yes, for a
Yeah.
couple of years, I studied jazz guitar down in New Orleans at a school called Loyola, and that was
How was
it was a
that?
it was a good experience. I don't feel weird about it talking on something like this, but I have found in Nashville that I don't bring up the whole music school thing a ton,
Yeah.
because I think that can carry a certain arrogance and rub some people the wrong way. Looking back, I had some great experiences. I was extremely undisciplined for a number of reasons, but still managed to get better. And I think a big picture, the most valuable part of it was just being in an environment where you're showing up for class, and if you didn't get the stuff together that you were supposed to get together, you were going to hear about it, not in a scolding way, but in a like, man, why are you wasting your and my time sort of way, and just that real world kind of thing. Because leaving high school figuring everyone else is like built the same as me, I guess, you just assume everyone's got a certain level of musicianship, I would say. Come to find out that's not the case, and
Yeah.
just
You find that out on certain gigs as well.
absolutely. So, I think the more than any trick on the guitar I learned there, it was just like a big picture musicianship, discipline, education. But, there's one story in particular that I always am grateful for, and it wasn't like the best experience at the time. Basically, it was like, there was like the jazz band, which was the big band, and you wanted to be in the top band and got to play some cool big band music and travel a little bit doing that. But then there was combo class, which was more like what an actual jazz gig would be like, a smaller group, And we were the combo band was going to do a performance with a great saxophone player down in New Orleans named Donald Harrison, who definitely got the bebop thing going on, but also like steeped in the real New Orleans tradition. He's a Mardi Gras Indian chief, big chief. If anyone's familiar with that culture, it's really a cool, unique thing for New Orleans. But we were doing a rehearsal with him, and we were playing a song off Wayne Shorter's Juju album.
Okay.
And we got maybe 30 seconds in, and he stopped us and went around the room and asked everybody who the band was on that recording. And a lot of the room didn't know. I happen to know just because that specific album is Wayne Shorter with Coltrane's band from the time.
Okay.
But, it turned into this like, guys, for one, he said jazz is not polite music, which that has always stuck with me, because it can have a reputation of living in coffee shops and universities and that sort of thing. But especially if you're talking about where jazz intersects with civil rights in the 50s and 60s, it is far from polite, the message behind it. And then his second point was like you have access to these recordings, and it's your job to know them, basically. And if you know what happens on the record, then you actually have options. You can emulate that, you can hint at that, or you can play your own take on it. But if you have no knowledge of that recording, you have only one option. That's to, do your thing with it. So that's always stuck with me, and I think it applies to any genre of music, whether you're doing covers at the pub or, you know, and any size stage. I mean, like, these records are kind of the letter of the law in a lot of ways. And you can just learn so much by digging into what's going on your favorite records and figuring out how to get near that,
Yeah, I mean, it kind of harps back to what I was saying a little bit earlier, but there's so many students that I teach, and I teach largely children between the age of
Right on.
7 and 17, and the vast majority of them don't listen to music. And it's not that they don't listen to like rock music or guitar music, like they don't listen to music. And I'm kind of like, okay, so what kind of music do you listen to? They're like, I don't listen to music. I was like, why are you here? Why are you wanting to learn an instrument and you don't listen to music? What brought you here? And I'm getting shrugged shoulders, like, I don't know. And it's like, okay, well, now my job has just doubled because I've now got to not only teach you how to play this instrument, I'm going to have to teach you how to listen to music. And it's bizarre because it's never been more accessible. You can have the whole music library of catalogs at your fingertips, and you're not listening.
That very point brings me to something that this amazing bass player, Larry Grenadier, he came to school when I was in college there. And his point was very similar to that. It's like, with the internet now, there's so much available at our fingertips that it can overwhelm. It is overwhelming. Whereas, maybe in the old days when, for me, it was like going to Best Buy or Sam Goody or something and getting 2 CDs, maybe, if I'm lucky, to really dig into, sometimes really having tunnel vision and like, I'm going to dig into 10 records this year, but I'm going to own them by the end of the, like frontwards, backwards sort of thing, I think can be more valuable than going an inch deep on 1,000 different things,
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's the same as you, that when I went out and bought albums, I had to make them count. It's like, okay, well, I've only got 10 quid, $10 or 15, whatever it was I had for that weekend. What am I going to get? I've got a choice of 3. I've got to make them count because I don't know when I'm going to be back. But yeah, I mean, I think it's overwhelming, the breadth and depth of music available to people, that people just don't know. Maybe they don't know where to start.
Sure. Have you had the experience of, in your teaching, showing someone something and just seeing the lights come on of like, I remember going to see one of my old teachers, this guy, Carl Filipiak in Baltimore, and he would do a Jimi Hendrix tribute, and just being in the crowd watching a guy play that music on a Marshall half stack just absolutely changed my life. Yeah. Like, I remember it down to the music on the playlist before they walked out. It's just perfect. It's like a bunch of tunes off Machine Head, Deep Purple, and just like that whole thing. I just fell in love with it.
Yeah. So there's 1 or 2 students that I have. There's one kid in particular who turned up for his first lesson about 2 years ago, and he fucking sucked. Like, no timing, no rhythm, didn't listen to music. And I was like,
that would account for some of that lack of rhythm, I would think.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, right, okay, so the same deal, right? So not only am I going to have to teach you, I've got to show you, give you music, and you got to listen to it. And over the course of, I don't know, 6 months or so, he would start coming in. He's like, oh, I learned this song. I was like, how did you learn that? He said, oh, I just went onto YouTube and searched for it and started teaching myself. I was like, all right, okay, well, show me. It's like, okay, you've kind of got all right, you've done, all right, good. And he came in it was like it was the start of the autumn term. So they've just had their summer break. He's been off for 6 weeks. And he came in, I was like, how was guitar playing over the summer? And he went, oh, I learned Stairway to Heaven. I was like, all right, okay, show me. And he fucking sat there and played Stairway to Heaven. I'm like, dude, all right, okay. He said, yeah, I did. I learned that, and I've started The Pretender by the Foo Fighters as well. I was like, show me that. He's like, he started going through the riff. I was like, oh, great, we can polish that up. And I started to see those lights come on. And he'd come back in every week. He's like, I've had a go at this. Like, I've done, what were some of the other ones? Some Deep Purple songs he came back with. He said, Smoke on the Water, Black Knight. I'm like, where are you getting these songs from? He's like, oh, my dad likes it. I was like, there it is. It's the parents thing. It's, if you've got parents that listen to music, they'll just feed you. And if you're like receptive to it, you'll just inhale it. And it was really, really lovely to see. And I still teach him now, and he still comes back. And his last lesson, we left my studio. I was walking him down the garden back to his mum, and he turns to me and goes, when are we gonna learn how to shred? It's like, well, it's gonna be a while, but yeah, we got to get you grooving first. So
break out the hairspray too, you know.
Yeah. I was like, well, but then on the flip side, I gave a kid like 3 albums, like a kid that doesn't listen to music. I was like, all right, okay, this week you're gonna listen to Van Halen 1. You can listen to Back in Black by AC/DC, and I can't remember, I think maybe it was like a Metallica album. I was like, let's see if that does anything for you. And he just came back and he was just like, no. I was like, really? No. I was like, not even the Van Halen one? He went, no. I was like, oh, fuck, okay.
Yeah.
So I sent him, but then I sent him away with Kind of Blue. I was like, what do you think of that? He said, yeah, I really liked it. I was like, okay, all right, so we're on to something.
Right on, yeah.
But yeah, it comes back to just go out and just listen to stuff, listen to what, flips your switch, tickles your balls or whatever, and we'll work with that. But if you listen to nothing, I've got to like fucking like throwing darts in the dark. I've just got to keep throwing albums at you until something hits, something lands.
Yeah, your story, it reminds me of like when I was, really just getting started out. I had a cousin, Jack, who taught me some like, this would have been like Green Day era, some of those songs off like Dookie, power chord type stuff. And that kind of sent me like, I think this is like a thing, Then I would just consume these guitar tabs online at the time, and little before, I mean, YouTube was around, but it wasn't the tool that it is now. And it almost took me an inexcusably long amount of time to realize that like I can just try to sit around and learn these things by ear. Like the tabs was definitely a crutch for a long time, but at some point realized that, all right, I can develop this ear and that thing. And I would guess YouTube can be similar, though a way better teacher than just looking at a guitar tab,
Yeah, I mean, but you don't get that feedback. So
yeah, exactly.
You could spend months on a tune, and someone says, you got it. Yeah, that's wrong. Not necessarily wrong, but sometimes there's an easier way. Maybe the guy who's transcribed it and has done the video has done something slightly wrong, or no, there's an easier way around it. So you don't get that feedback. But I mean, I think YouTube is kind of has, it's a double-sided kind of coin. There's a lesson for nearly anything, but also you've got to put your trust in someone else to deliver that lesson in a way
the right way. Yeah,
the right way. We'll call it the right way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely can be a crutch. And shit, man, I still use it if I get a last minute gig call and it's like, fuck. It's just sometimes it's easier. Can I get a tab? Can I get a chart for it? Or are there dots? Is it in the real book, or is there a YouTube video for it? And if time is of the essence, then I'm not going to use that resource. And I say that to my students as well. I encourage them. I was like, look, I'm going to give you a song. This is a song I want you to go and learn. Go and learn it on your own. You can use YouTube. You can Google it, Instagram. That's going to be your learning tool. But on the flip side, it's like, now we've got to do some ear training as well. So here's a song, and I want you to learn it purely by ear. And I don't care if you get none of the chords right. Just try it by ear.
Yeah, it's a great, I mean, that here in Nashville, that's definitely the currency is, just being sent the songs and try to write out a chart the best you can. And, where the pitfall of that here is, in the studio, you're called upon to create parts and really create something out of just that chord chart with the numbers. Oftentimes getting a call to do a gig live with someone, you're called upon to recreate what the person on the record played. And I've seen many folks confuse those two roles often, and I think it directly factors into why my brother and I even ended up on this Lainey Wilson gig in the first place. Aslan, who Freeman you interviewed a couple weeks ago, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he was producing a record for a good buddy of ours named Jason Martin. Not country music at all. This was like hard rock, Queens of the Stone Age meets ZZ Top, Aerosmith type of deal.
What was his name again? I'm going to check that out.
Jason Martin, and the album is called Alcatraz. But, it wasn't like that it was difficult music, but there were just a lot of riffs, there was a lot to it, well beyond just looking at chords. And when Aslan came in, producing it, we had already learned the whole thing, and we made the record in this Airbnb that he turned into a recording studio because he's a wizard. But I think just the fact that we learned that music put us at the top of the stack of people, because I think a lot of cats were showing up, not really digging in to that level. So,
Okay.
it sounds so 101 level to emphasize this to any listeners, but if you want a gig, learn the music. I mean, that is literally the way I know how to keep a gig, is to know the stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you've done it as well. You turn up to shows or sessions or whatever, gigs, and like someone hasn't learnt the fucking tunes. It's like, God fucking damn it.
Yeah.
It's frustrating.
I know here, I would guess very similar in London. It's like, my experience is once you're the guy that showed up, guy or girl, and learned the stuff, like that's probably you're getting the call next. It's really that simple, unless it's like a strict, you're just filling in for someone. But especially if artists are getting started out and don't have a regular band, once you're in, you're in. That's been my experience. So yeah, can't emphasize that enough. Just learn the stuff,
Learn the stuff and be on time as well.
That helps.
So, I mean, you alluded to this
that's
earlier.
played into me getting a couple gigs along the way, is someone not being on time and me waking up. So,
yeah. So I was going to say, you alluded to this earlier. I don't know if we'd hit record or not, but you mentioned like the gatekeepers at Nashville. I've always had this, maybe it's a slightly unrealistic view of Nashville, but my view of it is that it's just filled with fucking ace players and everybody turns up and everybody nails the gig. No one's late, and you just got the pros of the pro are there in Nashville. Is that? Am I deluded?
Yes and no. That's probably a little bit more kind of the legend aspect of it. I've been here 10 years now, and when I moved here, I was in a band, and we had a guy that wanted to manage us, and it felt like we were kind of being brought. Really, we were being brought to the starting line. Like many, many people. But, you'd hear the phrase 10-year town thrown around all the time. And
right.
I would hear that and just recoil, just like, oh, I don't want to hear that shit. Like, come on. And now, 10 years in, I've been in situations, specifically the last few years, where thinking like, man, thank God it took 9 years to end up in this situation, So a little perspective always helps. What I definitely remember about those early days is, learning about how quick things work in the studio. My old band, we would make records for like months, not every day, but like popping in a couple nights a week and just, really slowly chipping away at it. And, learning that they're cutting 6 demos in 3 hours and they all sound pretty good, this was pretty crazy. So you get this sense that there's like this crew of session players that somewhat walk on water. You're not one of them. And, then, it either kicks you into gear or it doesn't. And I've been fortunate to have that side of my career expand, but certainly not one of the first call session players. Fortunate be on Lainey's last full length record, Whirlwind, with Jay Joyce, who's an amazing producer. But I don't know. I guess all to say is like stick around and really try to work on that craft. And a lot of that's more just doing it, than any any specific practice regimen. I mean, if you're not playing in the pocket and playing in time, like, got to deal with that, But
Yes.
it can be equally, like, that's a given, and then it's about trying to be creative. And really, it's the idea number one, the producer doesn't dig it. Really, where the mastery lies is in how selflessly and seamlessly you can pivot into idea number two,
Yeah.
or three or four, without, man, this guy's a dick, he doesn't like me, all that shit,
Yeah,
So,
try not to take things personally as well.
yeah, absolutely. A lot of times in that world, it's, I think about it like an American football team, or even a, proper British football, right? Every player on the field is not the goal scorer or the running back, So within a track, and we'll just use the term popular music as a broad umbrella, but there's the elements within a song that are going to be the stars, and that's probably the lead vocal, maybe like the guitar solo kind of deal. But you need a lot of things in a track that are like lead blockers or playing defense, or allowing the stars to be stars. And for a long time, a big hole in my game in general was just strumming an acoustic guitar simply, And
Yeah.
now it's like a point of pride when I can walk into the booth and knock out an acoustic part, without needing to overthink it, and it works, and like, cool, move on. Like, those are some of the biggest victories for me, rather than like that cool guitar solo,
Yeah.
Because, if everything in a track is fighting with each other, you're going to have...
You have a bad song.
Yeah, it's probably not going to work. So, there's roles. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think knowing your... I mean, one of the light bulb moments that I had when I was at college was that the idea of knowing your place sonically in the song. It's like, well, one of our teachers said, people just they turn up to a gig, or crank their amp, and they get this really good bedroom tone.
Sure.
But then they bring it into a studio, onto a gig, and it's like, that just doesn't work at all. And he said, and one of the tutors, in fact, it was Joe Guthrie Govan.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, he
Not
was one of my
personally,
tutors. Yeah, he was one of my tutors
amazing
at college, and it's like, fucking hell, man, like jaw dropping. But he said, like, nobody does this. But just boost your mids, and you'll just cut through the mix. You can be kind of quiet, but as soon as you start to push your mids, you'll just cut through, and you won't piss anybody off. It's like, holy shit. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, like those little moments of...
Yeah, that specific point is like something I've been seeing a lot more on YouTube, as like some of these Nashville session players are really embracing that forum, if you will. Yeah, man, guitar's a mid-range instrument, and
yeah,
I used to always kind of scoop my controls on the amp in a live setting. I guess, when I was younger, I thought of it more like, this is my sound, I'm going for like one sound. It's pretty much a lead-ish sound where I can, kind of a creamier distortion, overdrive. And then maybe I give it some more juice if I need to take a faster solo or something.
Yeah.
And, you take that sort of approach into the studio, and I would end up with some kind of anemic sounding tone on records. Same thing with like wet effects, like I keep reverb, long delay, and slap on everything. Like, that's not going to work on every guitar track that you're layering in a song. Sometimes I love going as dry as possible, or taking a solo with just slap back. So it's much more about like what is called for tone wise than this is my sound,
Yeah, and it will only ever be my sound.
Right.
And I shall not change it for anybody.
Yeah. And for your own music, like, absolutely. I feel like my own stuff I do under my own name, the instrumental stuff, like, there is a more specific sound, much, more of a modern jazz thing, but that's for a specific project, if you will,
Yeah. So I also wanted to ask you as well, how did you land the Lainey gig?
Yeah, so I told that story of doing that record that Aslan Freeman was producing.
Yeah.
I feel like we recorded that maybe in 18, and then I had played a couple, like Aslan called me for a couple things here and there. My first gig with her, it was like a pickup band. I think he was playing drums. That's how stretched the list of people he was calling had gotten for that one. And she was like about to sign her record deal the following week,
Yeah.
And for me at the time, even though I'd been backing up, dozens of different artists here and there, maybe just one gig a year for a couple of years, like that would have been a high mark, as even getting the call from someone with a record deal, and
yeah,
record deal can mean a lot of different things, and most of the time it means nothing. It means they're just gonna kind of sit on you for a while. But in 2019 started doing a little bit more work with her, and then I was also working with another artist at the time, so it was kind of juggling, and that was feeling really good to feel in demand and that whole thing. And
mm-hmm.
the beginning of 2020, we actually did like a proper tour with Lainey. She was first support on a country tour, and it basically ran until COVID shut everything down.
Yeah.
So, that was a rough time for everybody. But, I think we did a couple live streams during that time and kind of figured we were still the band, but it was never like definitive. Yes, you are I was playing bass at that time.
Right. Okay.
And my brother was on drums. And then, I remember getting a text from Aslan with, double-digit long list of shows asking if we could do them, and it was like, yes.
Fuck yes.
Yeah.
Those first gigs after COVID, it was like, yes, I'll do anything.
Yeah, and I mean, don't need to get like too political, but the geography of these gigs were such that it was probably some regions of the country that weren't too concerned with the COVID thing in general, but a lot of like out Midwest and kind of like way out in the West.
Yeah, yeah.
But we were able to get vaccinated, work, not feel like we were putting people around us in danger, being responsible. And I mean, from I believe it was May of 2021, we played our first show in Arkansas, and at that time I remember looking out in the crowd and there was maybe like 15 people singing along to her song "Things a Man Ought to Know," which I believe was like kind of bubbling on the country charts, doing pretty well on like XM radio, Sirius. And I remember thinking like, man, that's a new one, of like going to the middle of nowhere and seeing people singing the songs of anyone I'm playing for. I played gigs for people with fans, but that just felt like this is a different league. And like I said, it's only a handful of people singing along. And then each week, it really seemed like there was 15 more people singing along. And, had a couple of those moments where you're just looking out to a sea of people singing along. And it's kind of, she hasn't found the ceiling yet. It's pretty amazing. And there's many, many points along the way that, that was 5 years ago, where this thing could have maybe slowed down. And I don't know that personally I would have thought twice about it, because blowing everything else away that I had experienced, but she really keeps figuring out how to keep ascending. So it's just, I play a very small role in that, but I'm fortunate to have, been brought into the fold at a really good time and, been kept around.
Yeah, it's great to see. I mean, it's not like huge over here, the kind of country thing, but I am starting to see more and more country gigs, country shows. There's a touring Nashville show, which is doing all the theatre rounds at the moment. So it's kind of, I mean, music always ebbs and flows into different genres, and it just seems to be a bit of a country thing, certainly over here. Was there a moment when you were doing those gigs that you thought, okay, this is now a different level of what I'm used to? Was there a particular show you're like, this is it?
Yeah, I mean, that first one sticks out. There have been some TV things along the way that, definitely stick out. We got to do Red Rocks out in Colorado, which is great. Got to record at Abbey Road for one day last year over in your neck of the woods, which that's just kind of like, this can't be real life stuff. But, it's also a really weird situation in that I don't even think it was like bucket list for all of us, but also they needed a studio, and it like was the most practical option somehow, which, the fact that that's even in the realm of things is pretty mind-boggling. And thinking back to my time in like my old band, we'd have something small go right and celebrate like the world was ending, and the pace of this has moved so quickly that there hasn't been a lot of that like sitting around congratulating each other time, which I think is good. There's value in taking a minute to like process what's going on and to look at some goals you're achieving. I find myself being more forward looking than wanting to sit around and
contemplate.
Yeah. I don't find that as useful anymore, and it wasn't that useful in the past.
No, I mean, I think looking forward is really essential for, especially if you're talking about things like career, you're talking about things like getting better at your instrument. If you're sitting on something and it's starting to stagnate, you need to get off, get a kick up the arse, and start looking forward. And the other thing I was going to ask is, do you have a favourite song to play of hers live?
Favorite song? So there's the title track off her record. It's called Whirlwind. That in the studio I was playing piano on, and live I play piano, but also we kind of turn it into like the long guitar solo moment in the show. So I get to take a Les Paul Marshall and give it a go every night, which is a lot of fun. And certainly you fall flat on your face doing that a couple nights in a row, and you'll find a storage closet and start running some scales that third gig, but that one's a fun one. And not even just because it's not a look at me moment that I enjoy about that, but I do think there's a lot of benefit to being able to get up and take a long guitar solo. I've seen it done at those shows that you remember and stick out, and some of my heroes were all able to go to that place, so that one just kind of feels like there's like a lineage of just getting up and giving it what you got.
No, it's good. So, I mean, I've never been one for center stage spotlights, but those guitar behind the back of the head moments, it's more for the audience as well. That's what I tell myself.
Yeah, the benefit I have is that I can just kind of play, and she's usually running around the stage. So visually, I'm not really called upon to, do the Van Halen jump kicking off the amps. But
yeah, I know. The last thing, I'll let you go after this. If you had $1,000, you're going to get a new guitar or a new amp?
Ooh, I think it's always need based. I think at the moment I would say amp. But the whole gear thing, I love that we haven't talked about it until the last question. I guess more broadly, like I'm trying to be prepared for a number of different things to be called upon, which that tends to make the list of tools bigger rather than smaller,
Yeah.
I've also found that, certain guitars, I remember I'd been playing bass for Lainey for a couple of years, and then Aslan had to sub out for a couple of weeks. Instead of him getting a sub and me continue to play bass, I switched to guitar, and then we got a sub bass player. Tommy Scifres, who's now actually, full time and has been for a few years. I had saved up a bunch of money and I was playing bass, so I wasn't really needing to buy much gear, and then I went and walked into Carter Vintage Guitars here in Nashville, where I'd gone within minutes of moving here and drooled over stuff and didn't have the bread to make it work.
Yeah.
So I went and got a black Les Paul, and I remember my girlfriend Danny commenting a couple months later, like, "Man, you've been practicing more than I've ever seen you practice." So it's like sometimes that piece of gear, if it's inspiring you to sit down and play the thing, then it's not all vanity, right?
Yeah. It's not definitely not.
But I think $1,000 for an amp, I think I'm borrowing an old Kalamazoo from a friend for a record I'm about to make, kind of get that cool tremolo tone and crank it up and get real ratty. So probably put it towards something in that vein, or like a silver tone.
Yeah.
Something weird.
Sometimes it's the weird gear that gets you those kind of very unique, or not very unique, those unique tones that you're after.
Yeah. And I say that because last week I went and dropped like $300 on a rubber bridge acoustic guitar, kind of a fad meets I think it is pretty cool and can give that cool attack to some songs. So, maybe 2 weeks ago would have been a different answer.
But needs must.
Yeah.
Listen, Kevin, man, it was lovely to chat with you.
Man, I appreciate you having me on.
No, the pleasure's all mine, and I know how busy you guys are, and there's a bunch of people that I've asked to do this, and I'm just amazed that some people have come back and they've said, "Yeah, man, yeah, I'll be up for that." And it's like, "Oh, really? Okay, cool."
Man, I feel the exact same way about being asked, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was lovely to chat with you. The best of luck. I mean, I know you've mentioned the jazz album that you've got out. Best of luck with that, and
thank you.
I do know that you guys are coming over in March. I did speak to Aslan.
That's right, yeah.
Best of luck with that as well.
Yeah, man, we'll reach out and maybe get you out to the London show.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was March 14th. You're doing the C2C festival.
Yeah, I believe so.
I think I have a gig, but I think I can get it. I think I can get it covered. And yeah, if you guys are cool with that, then man, it'd be awesome to pop down.
If you're working, man, we'll get you next time. But
yeah, you know what? It's a gig that I can dep out. It's not a big gig.
Right on.
But yeah, I will speak soon.
Awesome, Tim. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, man. That was